If you want to become whole, let yourself be partial. If you want to become straight, let yourself be crooked. If you want to become full, let yourself be empty. If you want to be reborn, let yourself die. If you want to be given everything, give everything up. In these times of chaos, I think it's great to look to some of the greatest wisdom teachers. This morning, we first read from Parker Palmer, outstanding Quaker teacher, writer. Parker names 6 principal paradoxes which are helpful to embrace for a learning environment. And I think embracing these paradoxes can deepen and enrich the quality of beloved community, both here in our congregation and all the different places in which we interact with our neighbors, friends, co-workers. Lao Tzu said, if you want to become whole, let yourself be partial. If you want to be given everything, give everything up. The beautiful paradoxes to reflect upon, wrestle with. Today we explore the paradox from Parker Palmer stating the space, the community space, should be hospitable and charged, welcoming and a little uncomfortable. Parker writes that the space should be inviting as well as open and safe, trustworthy and feel free, and should help us deal with the dangers of life, offer a little bit of place for rest and nourishment and shelter. However, he says, if the expedition is to take us somewhere, the space must also be charged. If people are to learn at the deepest levels, they must not feel so safe that they will fall asleep. You can fall asleep during the sermon, though. It's okay. People need to take risks inherent in pursuing the deep things of the world of the soul. Many of the greatest spiritual leaders knew about the value of embracing paradox of profound truths. Such a space should be welcoming and uncomfortable. Jesus was a master in hospitality, especially for those who found it in short supply. For example, a man clearly suffering with intense leprosy approached Jesus. Keep in mind, during these times, leprosy was a word for all kinds of skin diseases. It could be something that led to paralysis or death. And people who had leprosy were viewed as filthy and truly untouchable, unacceptable. The man approached, and Jesus not only said to him, "Be clean," but he put his hand on the man. He touched the man. He held the touch so long that it almost became a holding, almost became a caress. Jesus used his gift of faith by creating this kind of shelter almost everywhere he went. And Jesus was not shy about charging things up when the situation called for it. The money changers outside the temple were ripping people off with bogus exchange rates. Jesus said directly to them, "It is written, my house will be called a house of prayer, and you have made it a den of thieves." He upended their tables. Now, perhaps you could say Jesus did not know the best practice first step in conflict resolution. Directly approach the person with whom you have a difference and try and share and listen with the goal of working it out. Or perhaps Jesus did not care to take the first step. He just decided to jump right in and disrupt the system of corruption. Disruption. Mahatma Gandhi knew about embracing paradox or profound truths, such as the space must be welcoming and uncomfortable. Throughout his life, from the early years of relative obscurity to becoming a world-renowned leader, Gandhi's core persona contained what I call an element of the nurse pastor. He really was a nurse in a true part of him was a nurse, he said. At an early age, Gandhi was sailing from South Africa to India, and the ship hit a nasty storm. For some reason, Gandhi was one of the only passengers not wrecked with seasickness, and he spent hours tenderly moving around from passenger to passenger, giving solace and support, helping the people to be sick. Later, when he became quite famous, he was living in a commune. He was the big guy in the commune, and he insisted on being one of the volunteers who cleaned the latrine. He worked physically as well as spiritually to make Hindus and Muslims, Christians and Jews and others to feel like they could coexist with places for rest and nourishment. Frequently, Gandhi also took actions creating a charged environment. On March 12th of 1930, Mahatma and a small band of supporters set off on a 241-mile march across western India. The walk was an act of nonviolent protest against the British colonial government's salt monopoly, which placed tariffs on the mineral and forbid Indians from producing it. Upon arriving at the coastal city of Dundee, Gandhi illegally collected salt from the seaside as a symbolic act of defiance against the British. Those actions sent shockwaves across the subcontinent, inspiring scores of Indians to flout the salt tax, launch strikes and boycotts against the colonial institutions. Gandhi and some 80,000 others were soon arrested, many badly beaten. They never responded with violence. Back to the beatings. They took the beatings. Eventually, their peaceful protests captured the world's attention, demonstrated the power of mass resistance to British rule. Parker Palmer's description of the value of charged community describes Gandhi's leadership so well. If people are to learn at the deepest levels, they need to feel the risks inherent in pursuing the deep things of the world of the soul. Can't get there just on a free little walk through the tulip garden. Life does not work that way very often. It's good to hold up these shining star examples. There are so many of them that hold this paradox of being welcoming and uncomfortable. Tubman, Douglas, Olympia Brown. I think it's also valuable to keep it personal and simple and reflect on our life stories. And Parker Palmer does that by talking about the classroom. Many of us learned a lot of these lessons about the value of welcoming and discomfort and needing to hold them together. Everything we needed to learn, we need in kindergarten or third grade or somewhere close to there. I've been thinking this week about a couple of the key points in my life where I learned these lessons. I knew the negative consequences of the absence of safety. In my first years of college, I was studying to be a political science major. My professor, who I admired to the stars, basically kicked me out of the department telling me that my evaluations of the racist, militaristic policies of U.S. foreign policy in Central America were too emotional, too extensively subjective, and I'd probably be a better fit down the hall in sociology. And it was Chung Do-ha. He was I loved him. I was so hurt. How about you? Have you felt negative consequences, any part of your life, of a learning environment that did not feel safe or replenishing? I've known the benefits of a safe place many times, including when the sociology professors accepted me and said, yes, you can use your heart as well as your brain as you learn and become the best student you can be. What about you? Have you felt positive consequences of a safe, supportive environment? I've known the negative consequences of too much charge in a learning environment, and more than once I was to blame. This one seems so rudimentary, but I really think it matters to me in my life development. In second and third grade, my best friend Chuck and I consistently disrupted music class. We were like strategic in our planning. And on more than one occasion, the teacher cried. Many times, she actually came to my first sermon I ever preached and told me about this in the receiving line, and she was still mad. That is a true story in Chicago. But many times, she yelled, and at least a dozen times she kicked us out and sent us to the principal's office. And of course there's some humor to it, but begging for attention as goofballs, we distracted our fellow students' learning environment. What about you? Have you experienced from any angle an environment with too much charge or too little charge, too dull, flat line? I want to mention one where I experienced the good charge, where fear was so high in me. I was a teaching assistant somehow at the University of Chicago for environmental ethics. Highly intuitive Kent came to know with great certainty, and I absolutely think I was right, that all 15 undergraduate students were smarter than I. Just like, it was clear as day. So I was like, okay, I have to switch teaching models to be more of a support, and I'm going to learn a lot from them, and hopefully I can be a support to them, including emotionally, how to approach this class. But that charge helped me to be a better teacher. How about you? Have there been a time when fear or worry or discomfort has been good for you in a learning environment? It's not uncommon to feel the push and pull of paradox in beloved community. At times, things seem unsafe around here, too charged up, and at times too safe, too calm, not right. We benefit from the wisdom of Rumi, who said, live at the empty heart of paradox. I'll dance there with you cheek to cheek, at the empty heart of paradox. We have been dancing at the heart of paradox quite a lot lately. Many times we've been faced with profound truths which seemingly are paradoxical in our anti-racism work. On October 26th of last year, we had a Black Lives Matter forum here, an outstanding panel on the stage, about 100 people in the pews. I think it was a Thursday night. Some folks from the Philadelphia chapter of Black Lives Matter came, interrupted the event, shut it down with shouting and protest. They grabbed the microphone out of an assistant district attorney's hands, African-American gentleman. The experience brought into question possible paradox between some of our religious principles. I think we've been still trying to sort out that event and some other related events. Freedom of speech, freedom of the pew, right to civil disobedience. A lot of us have done civil disobedience for decades, mostly outside of this sanctuary. It hasn't been so common to happen in the house. That was different. How did it all sort out? Seemed a little paradoxical. This year has been one heck of a year for Unitarian Universalists. Peter Morales, Latino president of the UUA, resigned under criticism for being too complicit in white supremacy culture. We are part of the denomination. We are part of the country. We're living in the Trump ecosystem. Things are a little ramped up on all fronts. And we're talking with our hearts and our brains, trying to figure out what is needed or possible in fighting racism at the personal, congregational, and wider community levels. What are we called to do now? Now. One way to deal with discomfort is retreat, hide. I think at least we know the Trump ecosystem does not allow for that. You can take a nap, but you cannot hide for months on end or years right now. In order to make a change, we have to be okay at some level with discomfort and supporting safe spaces for each other. There's no other way out. We're in it. We're in it. We have a plaque right here. There's been a lot of great speakers at this pulpit, like Dick Fernandez in fourth row over there. But Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is the only one who got a plaque. Preached from the pulpit on December 11th of 1960. In order to keep this plaque up here with a high level of integrity, we have to consistently think, what would King's principles be telling us to do now? I've been looking back a lot to the letter from a Birmingham jail. King responding in Birmingham. King and his folks have done civil disobedience. They're in jail. The white clergy have written a letter to the paper saying, why are you disrupting things so much this way? Civil disobedience doesn't seem the proper or respectful way to make change. King's writing them back, explaining why disrupting the system is needed. And he explains in the letter, here's the point for us today, in my opinion. He explains in the letter, check it out. I highly recommend to check this out and look it up. Birmingham, letter from a Birmingham jail. King explains that painfully over the years he's come to see the white moderate as more problematic than the Klansman. The white moderate has seen to be more problematic to King than the KKK. In other words, I think people know the Klan are explicitly harmful, tenaciously evil in their actions, but the moderate white can seem ethical and be ethical in certain ways, but can, by what the moderate white does and does not do, maintain the status quo, which is unacceptably immoral. So what I'm saying is, I think it's a good thing right now for every one of us to think about, not in the Kingian sense, be the moderate. That's just like doing our thing on a daily basis, maintaining the status quo, which most of us think is unacceptable. So I invite you, I've told our Ending Racism team, I invite everybody, give me feedback, because I got a lot of privilege for many reasons, being a straight white guy who likes football and hamburgers, but also senior minister of this church. So if you think I'm being the moderate, holding up the status quo, which is unacceptable, tell me, please, give me specifics. I really want to know, because I know I have blind spots. And I invite you to think about doing the same with the people in your life. How can we move things along? Change is going to come. The board and I have a statement that's coming out any day, reiterating our commitment in these chaotic times to anti-racism work at all levels. And Debbie Ward, a member of the board, is facilitating a working group to try and coordinate our best, most effective, tenacious efforts to fight racism in the coming year. Who knows what we've done in the past? A lot of us have been at it for a long time, but we have today. Somebody who goes to AA for 30 years could drink alcohol tonight. You know, your experience is great, but we got to also do what we can today to fight oppression and make beloved community. Dennis and I were, and about 5 of us were in Pittsburgh with UUs from around the state this weekend, making a lot of good work, and we heard an African-American minister who's serving a Pittsburgh church of ours talk, and he said he is tired of having to work to have people have safe spaces and having to disrupt the oppressive systems. He's done it when his mother was a bishop in the 70s and everybody said she shouldn't be in the pulpit because women should be at home taking care of kids. Reverend Tynes did it in the 80s when gay men were coming to choirs saying quietly to him that they had HIV, and the church had to decide, do we try and like knock them out and push them away and have the men with the gay men's disease hide, or do we get a little uncomfortable and hug them and bring them in? And they did that. Reverend Tynes spoke about something that I know many of our members deal with. As a black person who dresses well, drives a nice car, he says driving around Pittsburgh, he can pull up to a light and he sees people like locking their doors, making sure he doesn't get out to rob them. It's exhausting to him, he says. I know many of our folks deal with that on a regular basis. We got to expand our efforts in beloved community to make it safe, including here, because I'm sure we do some of that ourselves here, including me, but we got to hold that balance and keep doing the work. Don't be afraid to be who you are, to do what you've got to do. That's what he told us on Friday night. Don't be afraid to be who you are, to do what you've got to do, and we're going to make the space for each other to do that. It's not going to be easy. It's an uncomfortable time in America, period. No change in that for a long time to come. So we can all help each other deal with it. It's uncomfortable, but we can go through it with heart. We humans ultimately don't know each other's stories very well, and we have 99.99% in common with each other, at least through DNA. So much of the world right now seems inhumane, and we refuse to give up our humanity. We refuse. We're numb. I'm numb at the pain of the mass shootings, and we care so deeply about the victims and want to find a way to change these patterns of violence. Right now, things are sad and tough, and we celebrate abundant grace and light flowing everywhere. Right now, things are scary and daunting, and we shall overcome. Many times it hurts to love. It hurts. But if we love with all our might, we can move past the hurt to powerful, transformative, life-saving love. Blessings be. Amen.